What's up, y'all? It's your boy Chris from Afro-Vegan back at it again with another garden tutorial. We're going to do some learning today. We're going to learn about everything we have in front of us. We're going to talk about some edibles. We're going to talk about some ornamentals. How can you start a garden with less than $30 in your account? I hope you got more than $30, but you get the point. We're trying to do this on cheap and we're trying to do it right. All right. So what I got in front of you today is we have a lettuce box. We have a ornamental kind of like succulent box, and then we have some herbs because we're going to make our own box today. And I'm going to show you how you can take the principles from one box and do whatever you want with it. So why do we do window boxes? Well, window boxes are a great way to have a lot of yields with a small amount of space. So when I pick these window boxes, I'm thinking putting in a window, maybe put it on a balcony, on the railing. I can put it outside in my front yard, and just it's versatile. So what kind of things can you grow in these window boxes? Anything that has a shallow root system, they're ideal for this type of setup. So I got succulents here. I got all of these succulents right here from TJ's. I mean, TJ's is a great pro tip for picking up some quick, especially like house plants, but they also have edible plants. They have herbs, different things like that. So definitely check out TJ's. But basically, yeah, you can get a bunch of these for like $2-3 and just really group them up. That's what I did with this kind of like ornamental box in the back row here. Now, with the leafy greens, I actually started these under a grow light. We're not going to go over these today because I'm not going to talk about grow lights today, but that's a good way to start. When you're growing in a window, you want something that's kind of already established. So the best way to do these window boxes is actually to get a transplant. And that's what I have for you here today. So we have a bunch of different transplant. We just have some herbs here. We have rosemary. We have thyme. We have some sage and parsley. I like these because these flavors all play on each other. You know, if you like Italian dishes, like this is pretty dope. If you like that Thanksgiving like spice box, like this is what you want. So I'm going to show you how to put an herb box together because herbs are the easiest thing to grow in the window. And I'll show you how. All right, so let's see what the setup looks like here. So first we got our Miracle-Gro potting mix. Most potting mixes will do. Make sure it's around 25 quarts. That's a good size for this specific container. We have our container here. So this is probably $11. This one here, this is a 2-foot window box. This will probably cost you around $11 or less. Then you have your herbs, which I mentioned earlier. I got these starts for probably $5 each. So I'm only going to use 2 of these today to stay under budget. This is all you need for your little garden setup. So let's get started with this. So I'm going to put the other ones to the side. I'm going to pick my favorite ones. I'm going to go sage. I love some sage. I'm going to go... Actually, you know what? I'm going to go the small ones in the middle. I changed my mind. I'm going to do parsley, and then I'm going to do thyme. All right. Before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and set up our box. Flip it over. You're going to need something to cut into the bottom of your container. So I have this drill right here with a 1/4 pilot bit right here. Now I wouldn't go any bigger, any smaller. This is about a good size. So you're gonna go ahead and first, I forgot to mention these. You also have these couple plates. If you're doing an indoor situation, a little hack, slide these right underneath your container. That will help to catch the water. So we're gonna put 4 holes here, 4 holes here, space them out just a little bit so it can catch that water. So it's really simple. All you're gonna do is go ahead and drill through. Just enough to get through the hole. Let's do a couple more. Should be really easy to drill through. You can see, boom, got that little ugly tag on it, but forget about that. There's your holes. So when it gets ready to drain, you put that right on top, and that will catch the water. And you can't even really see it, really. So that's a little hack for you if you were an indoor gardener and wanted to make it look nice. I'm going to do these other ones, and then we should be good to go. Now we're going to go ahead and add our potting mix. Now, when you go to find potting mixes, the thing really to look for is, one, the amount. So you don't need a huge bag. 25 quarts will do. Milk and Grow, pretty simple, pretty basic. You can, get it almost anywhere, any hardware store, any garden shop. That's why I picked this one. However, do what's right for you. Read the back. You want to make sure you pay attention to whether or not it has any organic matter. Pay attention to anything that's not really supposed to be in there. Anything that you don't recognize. Well, unless you're new and you don't know much about gardening. But basically, the only thing that should really be on there is the soil medium. So usually made out of coconut coir or some type of peat moss. You should also be looking for compost. If it doesn't have compost in it, it's probably not a good soil. That means it doesn't have that organic material that your plants need to live and thrive in its container. So keep that in mind. Compost is probably the biggest one. Other things you might see is like perlite. Those are those little white kind of volcanic ash, like puffballs almost. Like when you crush them in your hand, they turn into like sand. That's basically to help with spacing and water retention. Basically, soil should do 4 things. And if your soil doesn't do this, then you got trash soil. Okay. So your soil should have, number 1, it should have nutrients. So that's what that compost is. That's that organic matter. If it doesn't have nutrients, it's trash. Number 2, it should have drainage. Proper drainage for containers is key. You don't want your plants to become waterlogged. Number 3, it should have some type of aeration. So that means your soil should be able to breathe. That means it has pockets of air coming in and out of it. Helps the roots get down into the soil the correct way. And then number 4, it shouldn't be that expensive, especially if you are like doing practices like composting, which is a great way to reuse your potting soil. You want to keep reusing the stuff each and every year. So a great way to refreshen your potting mixes is to get your hands on compost or know someone who has compost in your area. All right, that being said, let's go ahead and fill her up. We're going to go ahead and add that in. I think I have just enough. Like this is a good, see this is not, that wasn't even like half the bag. And it's pretty much full. So once you get that soil, you go ahead and spread that out. You want to get it so that the soil is leaves about a 1/4 of an inch of space from the top. You don't want to overfill it because when you water it, all that soil is going to run down the container. So you want to make sure you have enough space here. All right, so I'm going to not compact it, press it down just a little bit, lightly tap it. That way when the water comes, it doesn't like collapse in on itself. I also like to hit the sides. That helps to even out the soil so it's not all bunched in on one spot. Definitely need a little bit more. I got about 1 inch of clearance left. We'll go ahead and start filling that up. All right, now that we got our potting soil, it's at a good level, we're going to go ahead and decide which plants we want to put in here. Now, I specifically picked these herbs right here because these herbs like to be dried out between watering, okay? So Herbs, some herbs like to be dried out actually between watering, so a little neglect isn't too bad. These do very well in those clay pots, those brown beautiful clay pots, because those tend to dry out faster than these plastic pots. However, you can still put them in these pots. You just have to be aware that they need to dry out completely before you water them again. So for these, you're probably going to want to water about 1 to 2 times a week, and it depends. And it depends on a lot of factors. Some of the factors it depends on is like how humid is your space, how much sun are these plants getting, how warm does the soil get, things like that. You know, keep that in mind. You have to really play around and find a schedule for your watering to figure out what's right for you. But I like these, maybe once on Wednesday, once on Saturday or Sunday. I would start off with like 1 time a week, see how they do, see how quickly they dry out, and then go from there. That's a good rule of thumb. But I would say 1 to 2 times a week. You wouldn't water these every day like you would a tomato, or like a vegetable like that. But you also wouldn't water it, once a week like a house plant necessarily, depending on, the situation. So I like somewhere in between. I think 2 times a week is probably good. 1 time a week might work as well. All right, so let's pick which ones we're going to do. I'm eventually going to put all these in here, but for the sake of our $30, we can only pick two. If I had to pick the ones I love the most out of these, it's not thyme, it's not parsley. Oh, let me tell you what you're supposed to do when you're picking these out, okay? So I went to the store recently and picked out these herbs. And things I look for when I'm picking out herbs or any kind of, transplant or plugs that have already been started for me, I'm really looking for about 4 things. I'm looking at, are they a dark green? Are they healthy in that way? Are they more on the bushy short side rather than the long and leggy side? I check under the leaves. Do they have eggs under the leaves? Do they have any insects I have to worry about, or pests, different things like that? And then also, people seem to forget this and overlook this, but sometimes they'll grow in like little cells, like you do when you have like a seed tray. Don't get those. The reason you don't want to get those is because those tend to be leggy. They tend to be exhausted and oververting themselves because they're in such a small container. You need some space for your roots to grow for specific types of plants. And so that's why I like to go a little bit bigger with the pot size. So I would say no really smaller than this. Usually the large, maybe like 4-inch. I think this is like a 2-inch kind of like pot. No more smaller than this, okay? This is as small as you would want to get for your pots. Don't get the individual cells unless they're like big like this, okay? So that's what I look for when I'm picking my transplants. Now, I'm going to go ahead and pick my favorites. I love rosemary. I love sage. Great combination together. I'm going to put these in here. Okay, so let's go ahead and put these in. So when you're going to go ahead and put these in, you're going to make a couple holes. I use my fingers, get down in there pretty deep till you're almost touching the bottom. Not quite. You do want to leave a little soil below, but you just want to, make a hole big enough for your transplant to get there. When you are going to take your transplant or your plug out of its original pot, you're going to go ahead and pinch from the bottom and squeeze. Pinch and squeeze, and then rotate all the way around. And you notice how I'm turning it sideways? I'm very gentle on the plant. I'm not like completely upside down because I don't want all that soil falling on the leaves and the leaves getting damaged, things like that. So I'm keeping it at a side. I'm gentle, but I'm also forceful at the bottom. Now you might get something like this where it kind of like breaks off from the bottom half. That's totally fine. Just make sure you kind of like tease the roots so that they can have some room to spread. So like tease them by like moving them around and gently spreading them out. You might get something that's root bound, which is where it wraps into this like tightly knit bulb. And so you want to make sure you tease those out. So I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to fill in just a little bit because the level, wherever the first leaf starts, that should be level with the top of the soil, ideally, unless you're going deeper. If you cover a few of the baby leaves, that's fine. I'm going to put this here. Notice how I'm covering the plant with my fingers. And that's one. I really want to put it in the middle and not close to the edge so the roots have a chance to get nice and strong. And that's one. Let's go ahead and do another one here, not too far away. Open that up. Create a little well situation. Same thing. Lay sideways. Get the bottom. Squeeze and rotate. Squeeze and rotate. Squeeze and rotate. Until it kind of comes out on its own. So we're going to put that in there. You want it deep enough just so it can be kind of level with the top of the soil. But if you want to put it a little deeper to get stronger roots, you can do that too. Put that in there like this. All right. That's two right there. Honestly, I can probably shift these down a little bit more, but I'll probably try to fit one more here and then one more here, and then we'll be good to go. So once you go ahead and do that, you're going to go ahead and water. A handy little watering can is nice to have, but also not necessary. You can easily use a cup. Just be gentle with how you water. Try to evenly distribute where you water. So I always like to water around what I call the root ball. So that's that little ball that came out of our little containers here that we kind of put in there. So water around that first and then moisturize the rest of the soil. So we'll go ahead and water, especially when you just put a new transplant in. You can already see the soil sinking. That's why we wanted to compress our soil just a little bit, just to make sure, everything doesn't just collapse on itself. So as you can see there, boom, it's set in place. Once you water it, the roots will start doing its job, and then you get it on a schedule and start watering that way. These are our two plants we get for under $30 with everything else. However, I'm going to go ahead and put the other ones in and talk a little bit about watering while I do that. So when you water, and maybe I can demonstrate with another. So after you put your transplant in, right? And you go ahead and cover and water. And these watering tips are for every time you water, not just the beginning. So when you water, I always water kind of like twice in a way. So I water once just to penetrate the top of the soil. Because especially if the soil is dry, this soil is a little bit moist because this is also the moisture retention soil. But a lot of soils will be dry most of the time and they need time for the water to penetrate down. So I water once so the water can penetrate down. So when it starts penetrating at first, it'll go about like halfway, but it won't go fully down deep into those roots where you need them to. So once, just to do a little small layer on top of the soil to get down to the roots, and then another pass, just enough to moisturize. And that's it. That's pretty much it. I do the whole box the same way, but you don't need to overdo it. You can see that this is moist. This has been properly watered. This has been deeply watered. That's why I like to do two passes. Once there's a layer of water that you pour on the surface of the soil, that's one round. Do the same thing. That's two. Stop. That's all you got to do. Now, I will say some plants have bigger containers and you have to account for that. So just adjust as you need based off of how big the container is. But for the most part, once you make a couple passes, you're good to go. Anything more than that is just overkill. All right, so we got our window box ready to go. Got the sage, got the rosemary, got the thyme, the parsley, and we all good. All you gotta do now is find your window, find your light. So the best place to put most plants, any plants, if you're doing indoors, is a south or west facing window. That's where you get the most sun throughout the day. That's the best time to do it. If you don't have that, put it where you can. Herbs tend to do okay even in somewhat low light situations. Obviously, the more light, the better. The more light you have, the more you'll be able to yield. Ideally, southwest window, but if you can't find anything else, put them as close to the most light you can get, you know, and add it to that. So that's pretty much it for window boxes, guys. These are really easy to do. And again, you can switch so many different combinations with these. You can try different potting mixes to see what works. Like in the succulent garden I do a little bit more of a drier potting mix. I got all different types of things in here, but that's for another video. You can do this for, maybe a couple herbs for $30. It also depends on like how good of a bargainer are you. If you go to your local garden shop, you build a relationship with someone, you could be like, hey, all four of these, $10? Maybe. I don't know. You got to know the person. You got to know how to work the system. You can also find, lower prices at like a Home Depot. I went and got it from like a good garden shop. Now you're gonna pay for quality if you go to like places like Home Depot who don't specialize in plant rather than the garden stores. The garden stores tend to be a little bit more expensive, but they are quality plants and they tend to be smaller, which means you can build a relationship with people and get to know the people who work there. And, maybe they'll cut you a deal every now and then. So that's the best way to do it. But overall, yeah, this is a great way to get started, guys. I highly suggest trying the herb box and seeing what you get. So definitely try this out. Hit me up wherever Afro Beats is. And I look forward to seeing what you guys can build. Keep growing. Peace.